let's get started on this. So this one is administrative. So of course we have both showing you the tool, but also just kind of going through because there's a lot of things. So presenter inside. Okay. So as Paul mentioned, I'm filling in for Manith. So I'll give him credit for putting this together. So the idea behind this presentation is to cover, this is going to be more for administrators, but it's the concept of going from an upgrade from 4.2 or 4.1 or whatever to 4.3 and what that's going to mean for you as an administrator. So there's things that you want to know before you do the upgrade. There's things specifics that you might have to do in addition, some additional steps. And then things that don't look the way they used to. So, all of those things. So we want to kind of cover all that. How should you upgrade? What's changing? Will the new version affect me a lot? What's no longer available? Anything brand new? And of course, what about licensing? And so we're going to try to cover all that. Certainly, will the new version affect me a lot? All the Webby people will be, and Renelle is going to cover this next, all the web intelligence stuff is, of course, through the Fiori look and feel, the HTML5. So it's a different portal look, and so it's definitely a need for training for all the developers. Anybody that's making changes or edits or creating new reports will want to have some training because it's totally new. And even your end users, if they're going into the portal to get their data, again, the portal is different. And so there's opportunity for or need for the look and feel change of the environment. But it is using what we call a Fiori UI, and that is actually used in a variety of other tools. So it's possible that they might be used to it. That's always possible. But there's so that's the new version will affect you in terms of the look and feel. But under the hood, not a lot has changed. A lot of things are still supported, but there are some new things. Some things that I actually think are really awesome that are new. So yeah, I'm going to point those out. Okay, so the first thing that people will ask is, can I do an in-place upgrade? And if anybody that's done any administrator that's done an in-place upgrade knows that you've got that the cache folder, import cache folder. Yeah, anyway, upgrade cache folder. I can't remember the name of it, but the cache folder that includes all of the files for each upgrade that you've done in place, so that you can roll back. There's a purpose for that, but it does mean that a ton of files are out there. So if you've been doing a lot of in-place upgrades, you probably want to do a new server. If you are upgrading to 2019, which is supported, then you will want to do it on a new server that has the new operating system. If you tried to do an in-place upgrade and then update the operating system in place, you'd have to create a new node and so doing an in-place upgrade, probably only if you're on a fairly recent pack and you already did a new server. So if you're in 2016, 2019, those are the operating systems in terms of Windows. And there's the PAM guide that's available online, can tell you all the different operating systems that are supported. So you can first and foremost see if what you have existing is supported by the new version before you do an in-place upgrade. So that's going to be key. Things like middleware is always a consideration. If you've got some old middleware on your server, you may have to upgrade the middleware as well if you're doing it in place. So probably, unless you did a new migration the last time, you probably want to do a new migration or a new server this time. But if you did a new migration, recently, and it's just one version, like 4.2 SP8, then then doing an in-place upgrade. Not a bad idea, but you definitely still want to look at the PAM to see if the middleware and all those things are supported. You will need new license keys. So just like with 4.1 to 4.2, we needed a license key, same thing. We need a new license key for the 4.3 upgrade. So you will need to request that. And there's steps on BusinessObjects support site on how to do that. And of course, if you've got service through us, we can do that for you. So first things first, what's new in the central configuration manager? So there are a few services. Here's like, for instance, a picture from 4.2. There are a few services that have been rolled into the CMC. So the automation framework that requires the messaging queue broker service under the hood. The automation framework is now part of the workflow assistant. So these have sort of been combined into one. And this itself will be, instead of its own URL, it's available, it's available through the CMC. So a little bit easier. So even just on this first central configuration manager, it will be slightly different. A couple of services that are different. Definitely when you get into the CMC, you're going to see some things that have disappeared and some things that have been added. So things that have disappeared, we have a few things that have been rolled in together. So monitoring the visual difference in the administration console is into the BI admin studio, and you can see it's kept the monitoring icon. So that's kind of your first indication. The workflow assistant, here it is with in the CMC, so that automation framework. The automation framework is notorious for being useful for repointing universes. So if you've got a bunch of UNV universes, you upgrade them or you recreate them as UNX universes, and then you repoint the Webby reports, I should say, not the universes. So you report your reports in bulk, and they can be other kinds, but yes, you can repoint in bulk is the key for the automation framework, which is now workflow assistant. So those are sort of things that have been rolled in together. The HTML elements also is in that BI admin console. So that's not gone away, it's just been rolled in to the console piece, or the admin studio, sorry. This one is new, the data source references. This one is one of the things that's new that I think is really going to make a lot of people want to move to 4.3. So this will be one of those like reasons to move. So what this does is users currently, if you look in their user environment, I'll go do this in the CMC, but if you look under the user, each user can have their own database credentials, but it's only one database credential. So you can imagine if you've got an environment where you've got SQL Server or something, and you're using Active Directory to get to that, but you've also got an alias for SAP authentication, and that's what gets you into your other, your HANA or whatever, Vex queries or, etc. Then you've got two different kinds of authentication that you would want to send to your database. And there's lots of reasons that people are wanting to have, one authentication for one database and one connection and one authentication for another connection. So, so this now is available. So we've got these data source references where we can set that up, and then within, where there's different connections that can be, or authentications that can be used for different connections. And then you can apply multiple to each user. You can apply multiple connection authentication pieces. So for data source references to each user. So big plus on that. So that's the new must-have kind of for some people. The servers, of course, in 4.3 by default, we've got, these, of course, you're in some cases, or in most cases, you're going to be splitting your adaptive processing server just like before, but this is just to give you an idea of the default servers. So you've got, much fewer servers, so we don't have the dashboard servers. And if you have Explorer, then we don't have the Explorer servers because those are both Flash-based and they're gone now. So they're no longer working, as some people have experienced firsthand. So, you know, we had some limitation on servers, but most of the servers are still there. You see connection server here. It's because only 64-bit now 32 has gone away. So, and you see the Crystal reports is now, instead of 2016, it's supporting the 2020 version of Crystal. So it's just moving on up. So we've got basically very similar, but you know, some changes just for getting better. So there's the just spelled out connection server 32-bit is no longer there. The dashboard servers are no longer there, and some other pieces. This has been renamed, etc. Okay, so as I mentioned, the workflow assistant is now the automation framework piece. So, or the other way around, automation framework is now workflow assistant. So you set up your system in the landscape management, and now it's just named differently. It's under systems instead of landscape. And it's all merged into one service, so you don't have to start the first service and then start the automation framework, which is what we had to do in the past to use it. So if you weren't using it in the past, no worries, but now it's all built into the workflow assistant, and you can use it now that way.
Hey, Amy.
Yes.
There was one quick question that was, does that include client tools going to 64-bit?
No,
but it looks like Paul just replied as well and said Crystal Reports 2020 is 64-bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, Crystal Reports. Yes, that's true. Yep. Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you, Paul.
I think you hit enter right as I asked you.
And I know that's good because I'm actually not as familiar with some of these steps, so that's good. There's so much. I mean, I'm going to show you under the hood. Like, you're going to see some things that there's so much new to know, but there's definitely some things that are clear. But anyway, okay. So no connection server for 32-bit. So yeah, that makes sense. So BI Admin Studio is now using that purified interface, which makes sense that they would use the same, front end as opposed to using a front end that's Java based, or so it's this is a good piece as well. So it has the same look and feel as like Webby does, with the big clicks, tiles to click on. So that's that. Monitoring is a little bit different. Derby database has gone away. There's still the ability. There's scripts that BusinessObjects supplies to output your data from the Derby database. If you've got your monitoring in the Derby and you want to then import it into your audit database, but by default, if you weren't using monitoring before and you want to start using it, it's already in by default the audit database. So, and then the other piece is Derby is no longer supported. If you want it to not be in your audit database and want it to be in its own database, it's JDBC supported, and there's lots of different opportunities to connect to other kinds of databases. So they basically made monitoring a little bit more, have a little more options, a few more options in terms of where the data is stored. But by default, the big thing to note there is that by default it is in the audit database. So any trending that you do will grow the audit database a little bit bigger. So you want to keep that in mind. Also, in terms of just changes in database types, the version management database, as has always in the past, or report to, and other four versions, had subversion and clear case. Clear case is gone and has been kind of replaced basically with Git as a database type. So version management slightly changed as well. So of course, new license key is required. Of course, Crystal will require a new license key as well because it's a different client type. So this is just saying, do one server before you add the new keys. since if you've got a cluster, you do one server at a time. So that's what that's referring to. Some of the content that's not supported, there are scripts that are provided by SAP to remove that content. So if you're doing an in-place upgrade, you have Explorer binaries out there, there's a script associated with that to clean that up so they can remove those off. So same with some other pieces, there's scripts that are provided. This is the knowledge base for generating a license key if you're not familiar on how to do that. So you can follow the knowledge base article, and then the same for the crystal reports is provided here. Wait a minute. Some of the other things about what's new in terms of the CMC and servers. So there's no more dashboard servers. No Webby Launchpad UI. Oops. Only the Fiori based one. So the Webby Launchpad is now the Fiori based version. And 32-bit processing is gone. The theme designer that designs for the Fiori is available to customize it, and it works much better in the 4.3. It's a lot of the bugs have been worked out. You can now add publications through that Fiori interface, which makes sense because you no longer have the other available. So how do I add publications? Well, now it's available in that. Same thing with BI workspaces. Your BI workspaces that you had before, they come over, you can edit them, and they're available to edit through the Fiori interface. That data source reference, that's the big one that I think is really pretty cool, and the workflow assistant and the BI admin studio. So the nice thing about the studio is everything's kind of all together. I really like that they did that. I think that's kind of a neat piece too. So some things were end of life. So not only dashboards and Explorer, but widgets is end of life. Query as web service designer, interestingly enough, is no longer has the client application. There's no longer the client tool for that, but you still have the RESTful APIs to do the same, to do a similar thing. You just have to use the REST APIs. So the ability is still there. It's just done through a different format. So there isn't the client application. That's kind of a bummer. I kind of like the client application actually for that. So the same URL works to get you into Fiori. So the BI, in 4.2, it's BI Launchpad gets you into the Fiori version, but now the BI URL works to get you into the Fiori version. So people won't have to update their URLs. There's SAP Streamwork. It's not implemented yet. Java report panel and DHTML viewer, of course, are now the verified. This is the big piece that will require training for people creating Webby reports. Things in Crystal have changed as well. So, of course, since dashboards are no longer supported, we cannot do like imports of Excelsius dashboards into Crystal because they're no longer supported. Java applets no longer supported since Java 9. So a couple things that are slightly different from the Crystal world as well. And then some of the different authentications aren't being certified. They're now just for maintenance. So there's some information on that if you're using that kind of authentication. So as I mentioned, since a lot of things have gone into deprecation, there's the option to have them removed via a script. So we provided the KB, Myth has provided the KB for you on where all those scripts are, the information about those scripts. So there's some for various types, this is going to provide you some of the query. This is just telling you what the SI kind is in the repository so that you'd understand the queries that are provided in those scripts. So that's to give you an idea of that. The Explorer removal is an actual separate tool because it does remove all the binaries. So there is a specific, as opposed to a script, there is actually a tool for that. Again, we provided the knowledge base article here. So what is the case with dashboards? This is a little bit late in announcement, but the roadmap is that SAP wants people that were using dashboards before to use Designer, maybe moving into the cloud, and so Lumira Designer as the replacement tool. So that's the idea there. So some options. Go ahead, Paul. Do you want to interject there?
Yeah, I think it's only fair to be said that SAP note talks about SAP strategy as being SAP Analytics Cloud dashboarding tool being the preferred replacement for SAP BusinessObjects dashboards or Excelsius. I definitely would not touch SAP Lumira Designer if you're not already using it, because it's going to be deprecated. And the reason it's going to be deprecated is because, again, SAC is the direction of choice.
SAC meaning the Analytics Cloud.
Yeah, the SAP Analytics Cloud is the direction of choice. But I want to make something very apparent and clear, if it isn't already to anybody who has used dashboards in the past. There's no equivalency here at all. This is not a natural evolution.
It's not a no code.
No.
Yeah.
It's nothing like Excelsius, and you won't be able to take an Excelsius dashboard and just convert it or magically replace it. There are tools like Squirrel 365 that we've produced that do that, but there is nothing in the SAP portfolio that will allow you to do that. So, if you are going to be replacing with SAC, you're going to need to build from scratch. You're going to build those dashboards all over again. And remember that SAC is a cloud-based analytics platform, so it doesn't run on premise. So it's quite a difference. So that's why I just wanted to qualify that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most people have already started down this path. So like I said, this is a little bit late in an old, referencing something that's already happened for a lot of people. But yes, absolutely. So this is just referring back to that and the various knowledge base articles regarding that. So we've been doing updating information on 4.3 upgrades out to people for a while now. So some of this was important earlier, but now it's kind of passed. So the Webby, Brunel is really going to touch on this. This is going to be her thing, but definitely lots of things that are different. So we just provide a link for that here, but or Minith provided. But there's definitely a lot of things that have changed. So just to highlight that, some things have gone away. We've got a different look and feel. You do need to order a license key for that, for the upgrade. InPlace does work. It works fine. Just want to keep in mind operating system, and if you've done a lot of InPlace upgrades already, you're going to have that huge cache. Probably a better idea if you're not fairly new on this server to do a migration. But if you are fairly new on the server, if you've got fairly new VM, then you can do an InPlace. Cleanup scripts. Webby's fully functioning. All of your reports should come over just fine. With the caveat of looking at some of the information that comes out of various bugs, and a few changes in CMC. Nothing is deprecated. So that's that. So I want to then jump in just to show some of these things on the actual server. Okay, so I'm of course going to have to log back in. All right, so here you can see, and I'm going to get bigger. Oh, that's not good. Let's make it bigger Zoom-wise, so people can see. All of us old people can see me being a old person. Okay, workflow assistant. So if we go into workflow assistant, this, if you're familiar with the automation framework, it looks the same. And so the idea is that you've got some of the templates available to you. You can create your own templates as well, and the scenarios, and you can schedule them. But the big one is some of the repointing of the source for a web intelligence document. This is really the big one that we use a lot of, that repoints to like a UNX universe. So if you're looking for a bulk option for that, that's where you'd find it. So the other one, let me just go back to the CNC home. So the other one, the BI Admin Studio, this is the one where everything's kind of been thrown in together. So if we look at the BI Admin Studio, okay. So you've got, this was running just fine earlier. I'm not sure why I'm getting this message, but you can see that there's an option to look at your various servers, looking at the document's last instance, users and sessions, information, content usage, applications. All of these are, if you click on them, apparently I'm not going to be useful to do this, but when you click on them, they actually go to I'm having an issue with my RESTful service. I don't know why. They'll go to the other, the detail on that specific thing. So it will kind of give you, one's just sort of the overall view, and then, summary view, and then you can dive in further, and then go back to the home. This was running really well just about 20 minutes ago. Down at the bottom, then you can see we've got visual difference. So like I said, some of the things have been rolled in. The HTML elements has been rolled into this area. So the HTML elements, if you're not familiar with it, in Web Intelligence, you can add things like a marquee and so forth, but you have to enable that, and you have to add the element into here, into the list. And you can add in the attributes like on mouse out and on mouse over and stuff like that. So lots of things you can do in a Web Intelligence document with just HTML, but because some things are less secure than others, like an iframe, for instance, there's opportunities in the Web Intelligence application to open up that security versus to keeping it tight, depending on if you're externally facing or internally facing. So just to keep those in mind, but those have all been moved into that BI Admin Studio. And then the thing that I really like is this data resource references. I've just got one example. You create a connection with the authentication that's needed. And then what you see, what the big thing is if you are having users authenticate to a database individually, not through a single connection, but through their personal connection, then that often uses either Active Directory or SAP authentication, some sort of authentication that's universal. So if we look at the user list, hello, give me my users. There we go. So if I look at a user properties, you will see that the database credentials now, instead of just having one option for the database credentials, we can go in and add different database credentials for various data source references. So that's the big thing that's been added. There's talk about them also adding in where the users can enter this information themselves, as opposed to having to rely on the administrator entering that information. So that's if it's anyway. So there's talk about that being in a future service pack.
Hey, Amy.
Yes.
It's Heather. We are scheduled to take a quick break, so I don't want to cut you off because everything
No,
you're
actually,
saying is
I'm
really
done.
cool.
That's it.
Oh, perfect.
That's
Then
it.
this is even
That's
better. All right. Well, thank you. This was really interesting.
Absolutely.
I actually don't get to see this side of business objects that often, so it was really fascinating to me. And as I just said, we're going to take a quick break. It's going to be about 5 minutes, so I'm going to play a little bit of music and throw some slides up, and I will kick us back off in about 5. So we'll
Well,
see
before
everybody
you do that, just really quick, I just want to show under the hood under Tomcat. I just think this is really interesting. I know this is going to drive you crazy, but if you look under properties, which this is exploded. Look at all the things that we can, all the different things that we can add various individual configuration properties for. So I'm kind of excited to explore this area as an administrator. So I just wanted to also show that there's some interesting things for customizing that.